Hi everyone, it's Elise from Kid and Clouder Colouring Classes, and I have a special surprise for you today. I'm gifting you all Chapter 1 of my new Jars of Beauty classes, my May to June colouring projects, absolutely free. We'll be learning how to create these simple backgrounds behind absolutely any image at all to enhance your colouring. So go and grab your favourite image and let's add these backgrounds in. These videos are taken directly from the class, so you can see how they run, and you'll notice some art fundamentals and art therapy chat at the start of the video. While it can be tempting to skip the talking and jump to the good stuff, I encourage you to please watch the whole video to help set up your class experience and get the most out of your learning. Want to colour the rest of the image with me? You can find the full class, which is suitable for beginners, over at kidandclouder.com. It comes with a full video tutorial and step-by-step booklet, free private tutoring, and lifetime access to do at your own pace. Hope to colour with you this month and enjoy Chapter 1. Hi everyone, it's Elise from Kid and Clouder Colouring Classes, and welcome to our May 2022 colouring class for pencils. In this month's class, we're colouring up a gorgeous image by Power Poppy. So we've got some florals here today that we're going to be tackling, a whole bunch of different beautiful bright florals where we can work on all of our art fundamentals and theories such as light source, texture, colour theory, creating depth and dimension. We also have our glass mason jar full of water. We've got some berries, leaves, and a beautiful, almost sunset background that we're going to play with today as well. Now, in our classes, it's really important to remember that the whole point of why we're doing this is for self-care. So this here today is not about placing any pressure upon yourself or about getting a perfect result. Try not to look at the classes as being finished projects, because that can also help to take some of the pressure away. Even if you're creating this for a birthday or for a gift, it's really important to remember that at the end of the day, it's just practice and it's just a chance to learn something new. As long as you take away one new thing here today, or you work on one skill that you already have, then you've improved, you've grown, you've progressed, and you've leveled up. So make sure it's about progress, not perfect. We all make mistakes, but if you are giving it as a gift, think about when someone has given you a handmade gift. We never look at the mistakes. We look at the beautiful big picture to see how all of our techniques come together. So try not to focus or zero in on any little aspect you don't love. And I will bring this up throughout the class, but I think it's really important just to manage our expectations before we jump in. Mistakes are learning tools. I'd love you to make them. You cannot fail this class. It is not something with a pass or fail grade. It's purely just an experience. And another reason why I bring this up is because if we stop looking at a class as being a finished project, we can focus on the fact that it's just a learning tool. So when you do a class, try not to just choose which topics are your most favorite. So if you're doing this here today because you love flowers and nature and you just want to do all the flower classes, it's really important that you also challenge yourself to step outside your comfort zone. You all want to learn to color. You wouldn't have purchased this if you didn't want to learn that skill set. So remember, the way we learn is by tackling every topic, every style, and every technique, even if they're not your favorites, even if you don't think you're ever going to color that topic again. Because what that does is it increases your repertoire of skills. It increases your pencil control, your understanding of the fundamentals of light source, of different forms, of different objects. So that when you do come to color your favorite images again after class, you'll be utilizing so many of those skills without even realizing it. Even if you did an animal class, all the theories are applicable to like a floral image, even if it's not the same subject matter. So try not to, I call it like a little bit of topic snobbery. Try not to be snobby with your topics. You want to learn everything, and that's what's going to get you to that point where you feel most proud of your results, where you're creating new things and you're at that level where you're able to experiment and troubleshoot and problem solve and really be creative. And I hope today, even if your florals aren't your favorite, that you're going to be taking away some new lessons and in growing those skills as well. Our classes always come with free private tutoring, so if you get stuck, lacking a little bit of motivation, finding it hard to take time for you, just reach out. It always helps to chat with someone about these things, and it's never about judging and it's never about being critical, but it's about giving you the tools to feel a little bit more confident with your work or for taking that time for you. So please don't ever hesitate to reach out. Help is always available. When we go to school, we don't learn just from a book, we learn from teachers. So make sure that you use the teachers and the feedback that are available to help you grow. Now, before we color, one of the most important things we need to learn about is called light source. I bring this up in every single lesson at the start because without light, we cannot see, and objects don't have any depth or definition. And that is the one thing people say they want to learn the most, how to create that depth and the dimensionality. And this is the theory that helps us do that. When we learn a new skill, we don't master it at first. It takes time, it takes practice, and it takes a repetition in order to get there. So if any of this feels overwhelming, it's absolutely okay. The more classes you do and the more you go over the theory, the more it'll sink in, make sense, and become second nature. Now, the way that we work with light source in our scenes is we typically work with what's called ambient lighting. Now, ambient lighting is a major source of light, like the sun or overhead lights in the ceiling. It's generally what gives the main source of illumination. And when we have ambient light, it comes down with a big cone of light over the entire project and doesn't just come from, say, one side, like you may have seen in other tutorials before. That's more of a primitive understanding of light, but now we're getting a little bit more advanced here. And we work with ambient light because it's typically the most flattering. It means that both sides of our image end up illuminated or in shadow, depending on what's actually happening within the image. So think of our light rays coming down from above. Now, whenever we have part of our object or image here that's popping up toward us, our light rays come down and it hits those raised up areas first. It makes those raised up areas look lighter and brighter, and we call these our highlights. Now, the parts of the image or object that are slanting down or curving away from that light, these are darker. They get hit by those light rays last, and we call them our shadows. Now, between highlight and shadow, we have what's called the midtone of the object. And midtone is considered the true color of the object as it's not affected by light or shade. So if you want to create your own color blends, a really good tip to just do something basic is to pick your midtone, what you want that true color to be, and then we need a color lighter for the highlight and a color darker for the shadow. So that's a really simple way to start creating your own blends. Now, one more theory that's really important to chat about is our cast shadow. So I'm just holding the duster over my hand here, and can you see the shadow that's on my hand? This shadow is our cast shadow. It's cast by an object in front or above another object, and the object below or behind is always the one that has the shadow on it. The closer these objects are together, the darker and harder that shadow is, and the further apart these objects get, the softer and more dispersed the shadows become. And it shows levels in our projects. So when we have a lot of overlapping objects like in our scene here, cast shadows become very important because they make elements stand out against each other rather than it just all sort of fading out and appearing on the same level. So this takes the coloring to the next step. Cast shadows are the things I see people leave out the most in their coloring, but that's okay because it's not something we know how to do. It's something we have to learn how to do. And like I mentioned before, if that feels overwhelming, it's okay. It's only because it's new. I put all of this information at the start of the video because when you go to color your image after class, like your next favorite image or next project you're going to do, it's important that we start thinking about these concepts and applying them. So if you think of your coloring as practice, every time you pick up your pencils, you can practice these theories and go over what we've learned. You can put on this part of the video again to remind you of these steps. And I really do recommend it because, as I said before, we're not instant masters when we learn something new. We forget things. So we need the reminders. We need repetition. Really, really important. One part of learning is actually like learning a new concept. The second part is then the repetition of that to make it second nature and to have it sink in. I'll often see people do one class and they go, yeah, but when I come to my next image, I don't know what to do again. Or even if they've done 10 classes or 20 classes. And the reason why they don't know what to do is because they're not actually practicing what they learnt in the class before. They're not getting out the booklet or throwing on the video and reminding themselves of the steps. They're relying on memory and having learnt everything the first time they had to go. And it's just not possible. It's just not how we function or learn as people. So repeat the learning experience. Use the video with different images that are maybe a little similar. Go over aspects again. Remind yourself. Flick through classes you have and say, okay, well, I'm going to do the hair from that one on this image, or the outfit on that one on this image, or the background. Your background here today, for example, that could go behind anything, a character, an animal, floral, anything at all. So you can start experimenting and learning and taking these techniques away. And with that, let's actually get started on our background. So it's like a really it's almost like a sunrise actually that we've got here today. We've got the darker color at the bottom, and it gets into the blues, to the purples, into our reds, orange, and finishing with a bright pop of yellow. So you'll notice what I've actually done here is I've created a rectangle around the image, and you can see I actually did this in Microsoft Word. You'll get the rectangle already in as one of your files when you actually get your stamp. But I just drew that in, creating a rectangle to go around. You can always use a pencil and a ruler if you don't like doing things digitally, though I do have a tutorial on how to do this on my YouTube channel. When I do little backgrounds like this, rather than filling the whole page, sometimes I like to do the rectangle and have the image sort of popping out a little bit. And you can see I do that the whole way around. I get to the top and the sides, and it's kind of escaping a little. That can be a really good way to draw focus to the image rather than the background. If I filled the whole background space with color, I might lose a little bit of focus. So it's always good to think about what the story is that you're trying to tell and where you want your eye to go to. I want the background to be a really bright pop of color, but I don't want it to overtake the image and my main focus here today, which is the flowers. So if you do have like a character or something like that, you could draw a little rectangle behind rather than feeling like you have to fill the whole page. It makes backgrounds seem a little less overwhelming and scary. You don't have to stick to a rectangle as well. You could do a circle. If you've got die cuts with cool shapes, you could trace around and start to put these in and around your images too. This is just one way to do it. We're going to work with this rainbow color technique here. And just before we start, just going to talk about the color theory. You'll notice that I'm stepping through colors logically through our color wheel. So I go blue into violet, into red, into our red, orange, yellow, and yellow. So we're stepping through in small increments rather than just going, say, blue into yellow. That can be a really hard transition to make. So by including each little step, it just makes it seem really seamless. So even if you don't want to see each transition, I would still do it this way and just shorten the amount of color you have in the transitions. So if you wanted to get to blue to yellow quicker without, say, all the red, I just do smaller amounts. So this is always the easiest way that you can start to create these rainbow sort of backgrounds. All right, ready to get going? I'm going to pop this one off to the side now, and I've got my colored image at the bottom here. Now, I'm just going to start with my blue, my darkest blue color, which is going to be indigo blue. And we're going to start to build up our colors through the page. Now, I'm going to trace over my rectangle. I know it's very light at the moment, so I'm just going to trace that so you can see the extents. And we're going to bring that up fairly high today. So I'm going to bring that up just underneath the little pink flowers here. The coreopsis is what we are coloring. And I go over that line a few times just to make it nice and crisp. I want to eliminate that wispy sort of look. Now once I've done that and I'm happy with it, I can start to do my shading up the page. Now we're going to work in layers, so I don't want you to come in as hard as you can and try and lay down all this color. I want you to just come in nice and soft and do small circles. You can see I've got good coverage on the page, but I'm not filling in all of those little white speckles. Those white speckles are called the tooth of the paper. So the tooth of the paper is actually that printed texture that's on the surface. So hopefully you're all using proper drawing paper here today. If you're not and you're using a smooth card, this is going to be a little trickier for you. It can still be done and it's still great practice. But blending your colors and getting them seamless is harder on a smooth paper. We want to use something like a drawing paper with a little bit of fine texture or grain. You may have used mixed media papers or watercolor papers in the past that have texture as well. This is a different type of texture. Usually the paper will get printed with different tooth patterns depending on the media that people use. So I've got a whole bunch of paper suggestions on the website for you. If you go to kitandclouder.com and click on the Coloring FAQs tab, you'll find a whole bunch of answers to helpful coloring questions there. So I would recommend to check that out. It's a big list. I'm using Mi Tante by Canson today, and I'm using the side that doesn't look like little circles. Now as I get ready to finish this color, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in real soft, like really, really soft. I can hold the pencil further back, which stops me from placing pressure on it, and I can just do these real soft circles that allows my color to fade out. So I'm not getting a hard line on the end here. You can see the color just fades out super, super softly. That's really important when we're going to have different colors blending into each other. We want to make sure the colors always end soft and without that hard line. If you get a hard line, so if I come in and I've got a line like this, I can just come over really soft on that edge and just get rid of it. Back to what I was saying about tooth, the reason why we want to keep that is tooth helps us get complex blends. Without the tooth, we're not able to build our colors up, we're not able to get the smooth blend, and we're not able to get the complex colors. So having this allows me to continue working. If it's all flattened out and it's all smooth, I can't keep working the pigment. So that's why we actually want to see this here today. It actually helps us with creating this complex blend. Make sure you're on the other side of things, make sure you're not too light. Sometimes I'll hear from people and they'll be like, pencils takes me so long to color, it takes me like, 40 hours to do an image. And then I ask them to send a photo for feedback, and their layers are like this. They're so soft, which is lovely because they're going to be smooth, but it is going to take a long time to color. So we need to start increasing pressure. So if this is you right now, it's okay, but I need you to be brave. I need you to be brave and press down a little harder. Let's get some pigment happening on the page. If you are here right now and really going gung-ho for it, I need you to soften a little bit and also probably make your strokes a little smaller. When our strokes are really long, we skip over the page no matter what pressure we're using. And then it's really hard to get it flat because we come over and over and over and over, and you can see it just doesn't flatten. So small strokes get in there and really cover it. So that's a little tip there as well. So over here, we've got fairly good coverage. I could even come back and do just a little bit more before I move to the next color. If I'm going to do more, I still leave a little bit of tooth down, so I'm getting fairly good coverage here most of the way. I've got a little bit of tooth remaining so I can still work on my complex blend. But as I get higher up, I'm going to ease back on my pressure. So I want that to get softer and softer. So you can see here, as I work, it now still blends out, which will mean the next color will be able to blend effortlessly into that. Now, since I've got this color out, let's go ahead and we'll do the other side as well. So we'll add our shading in here to match up with that other side. So you can come along the outline first. I always like to do the outlines first, as it just finishes off that edge for us. Sharpen your pencil regularly as well. A blunt pencil like this is going to be hard. And you can even see I struggled a little bit making that line. It wasn't as fine as I liked because I didn't have control. Sharpening up the pencil gives you back that control on your stroke. And I have a video on sharpening and different sharpeners on my YouTube as well if you'd like to check that out. So our aim here is to take the color roughly to the same spot as the other side. Okay, now once you finish with that color, we're going to come in with a violet. And I start a little lower from where that color is finishing because we're going to overlap these colors. Overlapping makes it a lot easier to get a smoother transition. And I'm keeping my pressure fairly soft and my circles small so I get in that tooth, but I am not aiming to flatten everything down. It's more important for me to get a smooth transition here than to get everything flat. And make sure when you're ready to finish with this color, I'm not extending this one out super far, that you really do end softly as well, because this is going to transition, slowly transition into our reds from here. So it's a bit of an awkward transition, and we want to make sure by coming in super soft that we make that as easy as possible. So because I've used about the same pressure in the last color and in this color, you can see there's no line there. If you have a line, that's okay. It just means that you're still practicing your pencil control and your pressures. This is a great time to practice that in class. So go over it again. Every time you pick up those pencils, you get to practice the technique. If you really are struggling, make sure you send me a quick message and we can chat about some tips. But just play around with that pressure. And remember, it's okay if you have that line there today. At the end of the day, it's not going to impact how beautiful that project looks. We tend to get so caught up on needing every little aspect to be identical to what a teacher does that we forget that these little things aren't really that noticeable in the grand scheme of things in the end. And I'll see people start and restart to the point that they're just frustrated and they don't want to keep going. And all that does is reduces your love of the hobby and your willingness to learn. So just accept that's an area to work on and then just continue on. Remember, something is not a pass or a fail. Having an area to work on is an opportunity to learn. You can see it as an opportunity or you can see it as a mistake. Which one you choose is always going to determine how far you're going to go with your coloring and how much you're going to grow. So keep that in mind. The next color is a tiny little bit of Tuscan red. Now this is a color family jump, so we've gone from the purples into our red now. So it's really important that we overlap these colors where they meet and that we keep our pressure super, super soft. Keep it soft while you build it up in little layers. And I even like to come back the other way. So when I've done that, I'll come back with the violet and I'll go over where the Tuscan red started. So it's like we're just working back and forth to get that transition soft. Same on this other side, keep it really light. And you can come back with the violet, work on getting that transition soft and smooth. Alright, my next color is crimson red. So you can see we're slowly getting lighter and brighter. I come over some of that Tuscan red, keeping my pressure really soft as I cycle through these color families. Now, a good tip, if you are following a tutorial and you're trying to figure out how far to extend each color and you're not comfortable doing that on your own yet, is you can use the image as a guide for how far to extend it up. So you can see I'm sort of halfway through that coreopsis flower at the moment, and that's how far that red is going to go. So you can look at the image, look for any key features as a guide for how far your colors are extending. And there's no rule for this either. I'm just wanted to have quite a lot of the blue at the bottom, quite a lot of yellow at the top, and I'm keeping my middle colors just in between, just in that middle portion of the image to separate it nicely. Come through, make sure it's about roughly even. Notice my coverage on the page. I've got fairly good coverage. You can see the vibrancy to the colors. The blending is smooth, but I do have the tooth showing through. Next color is a little bit of pale vermilion. So this is a red-based orange. So I am definitely working in small increments of color, getting that transition really soft, rather than just stepping through my colors quickly. Next color, a little bit of yellowed orange. Now you're starting to come in and around all of these florals at the top. So it's really important to have a sharp pencil for this step, so you do have the control of how far your colors are extending and coming in between, getting those lines. You'll notice what I'm doing here is I like to draw the line up against the objects before shading in that area, and make sure that my edges are really defined, because we don't want to get like that speckly sort of look at the edge, because then our objects won't have that nice outline to them. They'll start to appear a little bit washed as well. So by really defining that edge, it ensures that everything has really nice detail. So take your time, work with a bit of pressure too. In these smaller areas, you can get a little heavier with the pressure because you don't have as much area that you need to try and make smooth. We usually use light pressure to build up colors and to build up blends. So if you're not really blending a lot in an area, you can come in and lay down more pressure. Sunburst yellow is next, and we're definitely getting higher on the page with each color. I've only got one more color after this actually that I'm using. So I want to make sure that I'm bringing this up high enough that we don't just have a whole lot of the last color left. So I'm going to bring this up just past that middle point on that Coreopsis flower at the top. So our image today here is by Power Poppy. And I love their florals, but what I love about them most is when you go to buy one of their images, in the description, it actually usually says what variety of flowers she's used in the image. This is really helpful because it means that you can hop on Google and just give them a quick search, see what color varieties they come in, see if there's any distinctive patterns or markings or textures, or any features of that flower, and you can incorporate it into your coloring. This will make it always look more realistic as well. So research the topic that you're coloring. Remember, coloring is all about just having fun and doing that little bit of research and planning out what you're going to do. It's your way to add your creative mark on a piece. This is your way to start customizing and making it look more realistic, even if it is just a really cute image. So you can really start to take control of your creativity. Just because you're not doing the outline illustration, it doesn't mean that you're not an artist and you're not creating, giving a piece life. I saw someone post in our group recently that they were glad to just be able to create, even if it means they're not an artist. But if you're creating, you are an artist. And this is really important because I think people only think if you draw an outline that that's art. But I can guarantee to you that there are many more illustrators that know nothing about coloring, and they wouldn't be able to color up a piece like we're going to do here today. And that's not a bad thing either. It's just a different skill set. Did you know that Disney actually employ different people to illustrate and different people to render or color their works? It's two totally different jobs because it requires different skills. All right, now the next color, Canary Yellow. And we'll bring that all the way to the top of that rectangle that we created. So never sell yourself short just because someone doesn't understand what you do either. I feel like we can get a bit of skepticism from like family or friends because they don't know the work that goes into learning a hobby like this. But in reality, we don't know the work that goes into any hobby unless we do it ourselves. So it's not a prejudice against coloring, it's that people often just don't know and understand what they don't know. So
I also do dance as a hobby as well, and it's the same thing. People think dancing is easy because everyone can technically dance, but learning all the foundations, learning the movement, there's a lot of technique and skill there as well. But we always underestimate what we don't understand, for the good and the bad. So try not to ever take it personally, especially when you give a handmade gift. A lot of time people don't realize the work and love that goes into it, and that's nothing against you and what you've created. It's just that they don't understand. So I always like to say, forgive people their ignorance, because sometimes we can be ignorant as well. All right. So right now we have our background and we've gone through all the colors. We've got a really nice transition happening here. We've got it smooth. Hopefully yours is smooth. If it's not, have a look where your lines may be harsh. Can you come back in with a soft pressure and just fuzzy up those lines? Soften them back down in any way. Is your pressure really, really soft and you don't have the vibrancy? If so, I want you to repeat everything again. Build up those colors. If you're at a point like me where you've got barely good coverage, but we do have some tooth showing through, we have the option of repeating everything again, and it is literally exactly the same. It's important that we work with small strokes so we really get into everywhere, and that each color ends softly. One other thing you can do is you can come in with your colorless blender pencil. Now your blender pencil is the same core as the pencil you were just using, but there's no colored pigment. So that's really important. Remember what I just said. No pigment means I can't add more color once I'm using this. So whatever's there now, this needs to be as bright as I want it. And if I bring in my original, I can see it's pretty much as bright as this. All the blender is going to do is push around what's already on the page, and that will help to flatten the excess tooth that's showing, but it's not going to make it brighter. So you need to make sure this is as bright as you want it, and then you can use your blender to fine tune. Now because of this, I wouldn't use the blender everywhere. If I was doing something where I really want my blend to be super smooth and it's really detailed, like say the skin of a character, I would prefer to relayer my pencils and have that control over the blend, make sure there's no splotchy areas or anything, because the blender can sometimes create a little bit of texture, or if you haven't layered enough in a certain area, you may not get as soft a blend as you'd like. So you don't have to use the blender, but it can speed up the process for you. So all we do if you are using the blender is we just pop in with the same stroke that we've been doing. You work on a small stroke, but a little bit more pressure. And we start to soften down the tooth in the page by pushing that pigment straight into it. You will have to sharpen every so often, so when it goes blunt and you start losing that control, just give it a quick turn on the sharpener to bring up the point. If you don't have a blender or your coloring is quite light at the moment, just repeat the steps that we did previously again to build up that extra pigment. Now I like to go through and do each color at a time. So once I've done the blue on the side, rather than go the whole way up, I'll do the blue on the other side. That's because your pencil picks up the color, and you can see on the bottom of my blender I've got that blue there. So I don't want to inadvertently put blue like in my yellow area or something like that. You can wipe it off though if you were ever doing transitions between your colors like that. But I just find it's easier to do the whole thing at once. Make sure you come over your edges as well to get them nice and crisp. Now, if you've used Gamsol in the past, you can absolutely use Gamsol. So instead of your blender, you could use your Gamsol right now. The technique, if you prefer to use Gamsol, is exactly the same as using just your pencils. But I will give you a little bit of a warning. Gamsol is not actually something artists traditionally use with their pencil work. It's something crafters have jumped on lately because a few tutorials got popular, because it's an easy way to get things smooth. What it does is it breaks down the pigment into a paint-like surface. You can kind of move it just like we're doing now, but it's more of like a liquid. Now the problem with this is kind of like our problem with the blender. We lose control. We're not able to get as much detail, and we'll lose vibrancy as well because we're breaking down the pigment. So this is really important to think about. You don't need to use solvents to get smooth coloring. If you're struggling with getting the tooth flat, don't just cheat it and just start using Gamsol. I recommend for you to learn how to do the techniques first so you can make informed decisions with your coloring, not easy decisions. That's really important because sometimes we can look for the easy way out rather than giving ourselves just a chance to be a beginner and learn something. So learn first how to do something and then you can decide if it's for you. Don't just pick the easy option. When you work on complex pieces like something like this, you're always going to get the best result using just the pencils. Gamsol is typically used by artists when they want to fill really large areas, like this background for example. It's just a quick way to break it down to get more coverage, like a marker. But when I'm doing detail work, I really kind of want to stay away from the Gamsol because it's going to make it harder for me to really build on those fine lines and really get the detail and the blends that I want. So that's something to keep in the back of your mind. I see it recommended a lot, but I see it recommended a lot by people who don't really understand how to color. What you choose to do, there's no right or wrong, so no one's ever going to look down on you for that. But again, make sure that you're choosing from a place of knowledge, not from a place of ease. And I say that with love because at the end of the day, you are all here because you want to learn. So let's learn some different things and really play around with how to get these techniques happening in your body and getting that control. If you struggle with pain when you color, this is one thing people do bring up. There are a lot of things you can do to make it more pain-free. And usually it'll be down to your coloring style, how you're holding the pencil and the pressure you're using. But we can actually control some of that. So feel free to pop me a note anytime if you struggle with arthritis or things like that. And we can always talk about some tips to make coloring easier for you too. As you come in and around all the parts of the flower, you may find it helpful to sharpen up those pencils again to bring back just that little bit more control over those fine lines. Okay, now you can see that's actually my background all finished up. I flattened that tooth and those colors are transitioning really nicely. Now because we will color differently, you may need to assess some areas, you may need a little bit more pigment, you may need to come through with your blender again. Just keep working it until you're happy with that result. But again, this background can be used behind anything now. It doesn't just have to be what this project is today. Experiment by placing it behind your other character stamps, your other florals. Create different shapes of your backgrounds. You can use as much or as little as you like. Now, remember, this is your first time trying this technique, and when we try new things, we can often have mistakes in areas we don't love. It's totally normal. Before looking at your work, I want you to do something really important, and that's change your perspective. When we're coloring, we color from about 10 or 20 centimeters away. We color so up close, focusing on every single little detail, every mistake, every single little aspect. But that's not actually how coloring is viewed. Think about whenever you're online, you see someone else's work. Do you sit so close and scrutinize looking for mistakes? No, you look at the whole thing. You appreciate it in entirety, how the techniques have come together. That's what we want to do here as well. So to help you change your perspective, what I would encourage you to do is hop up out of your chair, do some hand stretches, just open and close your hands a few times. Make sure you're not getting any RSI from holding those pencils. Neck gently from side to side, and even do a lap walking around the room just to loosen up. Then when you come back, hold your coloring out at arm's distance or prop it up against the wall and take a few steps back. You're changing that perspective, viewing it as a whole and seeing how it's coming together. Make sure you do those things so you actually get up and do your stretches. It helps so much rather than just holding it back and looking. So when you're looking at your whole piece, remember if there's areas you don't love, instead of saying I've done this wrong or it's not perfect, really don't like when people say that. Try and always avoid it, especially if you're sharing online as well. What I want you to do instead is look at your piece and say, any areas you don't love, think of the lesson here. Next time I'm going to do this to get this result. And see, all of a sudden you change negative into positive into constructive. It's your learning opportunity, and that's exactly what we're here to do today. So experiment, have fun with it. You're doing a great job. I'm really excited to see how you're going. Pop in and share your coloring after this step with us. Pop it in our Facebook group, pop it on Instagram, your blogs, any other group. You're welcome to share any way you like. All I love is that you please just mention that you're learning at Kid and Clouder so others can come and learn with us as well. I'd love if you mention what class it is. But you are working hard. You are challenging yourself. You're pushing yourself. That deserves to be celebrated. So again, give yourself a big pat on the back. You've done the most important thing to help you grow your coloring here today, and that's just having a go.